Good day, everyone. Today, we, the awesome group from 𝚿𝚛𝚘𝚓𝚏, will discuss to you what we learned from the subject Understanding the Self. I am Roslyn Galindo. I am going to tackle the first lesson, which is the self from various philosophical perspectives. And the remaining topics will be discussed by my group mates. Let's start. Module 1, the self from various philosophical perspectives. The history of philosophy is replete with men and women who inquired into the fundamental nature of the self, along with the question of the primary substratum that defines the multiplicity of things in the world. The inquiry on the self has preoccupied the earliest thinkers in the history of philosophy, the Greeks. The Greeks were the ones who seriously questioned myths and moved away from them in attempting to understand reality. First ancient philosopher is Socrates. He believed that man is composed of body and soul. This means that every human person is dualistic, that is hence composed of two important aspects of his personhood. For Socrates, this means all individuals have an imperfect and permanent aspects to him, and the body while maintaining that there is also a soul that is perfect and permanent. The second ancient philosopher is Plato. Plato added that there are three components of the soul: the rational soul, spirited soul, and appetitive soul. Rational soul purged by reason and intellect that governed the affairs of human person. The spirited soul was in charge of emotion, while the appetitive soul was on man's desires like sleeping, eating, drinking, and having sex are controlled as well. When this ideal state is attained, then the human person's soul becomes just and virtuous. And now, we're done from the ancient philosophers. Let's go to medieval philosophers. Medieval philosophers are Saint Augustine and Saint Thomas Aquinas. Saint Augustine viewed that man is bifurcated nature. An aspect of man dwells in the world and is imperfect and continuously yearns to be with the divine, and the other is capable of reaching immortality. The body is bound to die, and the soul is to anticipate living eternally in a realm of spiritual bliss in communion with God. Saint Thomas Aquinas. For Aquinas, man is composed of two parts, matter and form. Matter refers to the common stuff that makes up everything in the universe. Man's body is part of this matter. Form refers to the essence of a substance or thing. It is what makes it what it is. To Aquinas, the soul is what animates the body. It is what makes us human. Now, we're done from medieval philosophers. Let's go to the modern and contemporary philosophers. The modern and contemporary philosophers are René Descartes, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, Gilbert Ryle, and Merleau-Ponty. First is René Descartes. He was the father of modern philosophy. For him, the self is a combination of two distinct entities: the cogito, the thing that thinks, which is the mind, and the extensa or extension of the mind, which is the body. In Descartes' view, the body is nothing else but a machine that attached to the mind. The human person has it, but it is not what makes a man a man. If at all, that is the mind. Second is David Hume. For him, the self is nothing but a bundle of impressions. Here are the basic objects of our experience or sensation. It is our direct experience with the world. So, self, according to Hume, is simply a bundle of, or collection of different perceptions which succeed each other with an inconceivable rapidity and are in a perpetual flux and movement. Means simply want to believe that there is a unified, coherent self, a soul or mind, just like what the previous philosophers thought. In reality, what one thinks is a unified self is simply a combination of all experiences with a particular person. Third is Immanuel Kant. Thinking of the self as a mere combination of impressions was problematic according to Kant. There is necessarily a mind that organizes the impressions that men get from the external world. Time and space, for example, are ideas that one cannot find in the world, but is built in our minds. Kant calls this the apparatus of the mind. Thus, the self is not just what gives one his personality. In addition, it is also the set of knowledge acquisition for all human persons. Fourth is Gilbert Ryle. For Ryle, what really matters is the behavior that a person manifests in his day-to-day life. Ryle suggests that the self is not an entity one can locate and analyze, but simply the convenient name that people use to refer to all the behaviors that people make. Fifth is Merleau-Ponty. Ponte is a phenomenologist who asserts that the mind-body bifurcation that has been going on for a long time is a futile endeavor and an invalid problem. Unlike Ryle, who simply denies the self, Merleau-Ponty instead says that mind and body are so intertwined that they cannot be separated from one another.
Today, I'm going to share what I have learned in understanding the self, which is the self, the society, and the culture. Do you believe that the way you understand yourself influence you by the things you see in your environment? So, what is self? Self is a private and independent, which means you are living with your own definition of self. It is you who define it, nothing else, of course. And I've also learned in understanding the self is to love who you really are. When it comes to society and culture, everything you see and feel are a part of your social world. According to social constructivists, they clearly define that self is struggling to fit in the society where we belong. When you try to take to fit in, it doesn't guarantee that you will get a positive effect because it has a negative effect. And you are the only person who assesses yourself if what you are doing is right or wrong. The idea of anthropologist about self, Marcel Mauss. He is a French anthropologist who clearly explained the self and the culture according to him. That self has two faces, which is the moi and persona. Moi is your basic identity that makes you who you are as a person, and the persona is what makes certain things adjustment to yourself. We can make a positive and negative changes to ourselves because our persona is always positive. And why it is so? Because self has two faces, which is the moi and persona. For example, if your friend is taking cigarette and you tried it, so possibly your behavior will be affected because your persona always chooses to adjust even if you don't try it first because our society is so influential. We base on what we see or what we feel in our environment. That's why understanding the self is critical and difficult because everything we see is a matter of choice. So, when you think about self and development of social world, and how did we develop as a person, and how did I develop this way, and why I'm so confident in speaking compared to others? Because that's how I see within my own family, and it taught me this way, and that's how I develop as a person. So now let's talk about Mid and Vygotsky. They discuss the idea of self and development of social world according to them that human based on how they acquire language and interaction with others. And I don't know if you will believe them or not, but for me it is true. Because everything I observe in my environment influence me the way how I understand myself. I have a good mindset, possibly I have a good observation about my family, and if it not, possibly I don't have a good observation about them. And don't discourage why, because in every rule there's an exemption, and not everything I see in my environment, whether it is a positive or not, affect the way how I understand myself. And it's very critical in understanding the self. It's a wide and a long journey, and that's how Vygotsky and Mid develop self. And you don't have to worry of having difficulties in self and understanding the self because it is part of our learning journey. Let's more on gender and self. Gender can be changed, but sex is not. We only have two gender, which is the male and the female. Meaning, the way how I see myself is female, so I should act like a woman as the part of the society. And same as the male, if you choose to be a male, so you should act like a man as also part of the society. That's the idea on how we understand the self, society, and the culture, because I know that society and culture play a bigger role in defining ourselves because our self has a small portion and it's flexible. And we should be careful in knowing and engaging ourselves to everything that surrounds us. And that's the lesson, and that's how I ended up my topic. So thank you for listening, guys, and the next topic will be given.
Thank you. So, the last video that you've watched, we were able to understand the self, society, and culture. Now, let's proceed to the self as cognitive construct. By the way, I am 𝚿𝚛𝚘𝚓𝚎 from 𝚿𝚛𝚘𝚓𝚎. Now, let's define first the self by one of the famous psychologists, Carl Rogers. Captured this idea in his concept of self-schema, or our organized system or collection of knowledge about who we are. So, self-concept, these are the fragments in our minds of what we think. For example, family. The word family for me, my self-schema of that is the things that I think of my family. Self-schema is unique to every one of us, and it depends on our experiences on it. So, now let's proceed to the theory of symbolic interactionism. Under this theory, Hug and Vaughan, 2010, they said that the self is created and developed through human interaction. So it means that our self can be molded by our society. But actually, our self is molded by the society itself. But in here, there are three reasons why self and identity are actually the products of the society. It is by 𝚿𝚛𝚘𝚓𝚎, Elmore, and Smith of 2012. First, we do not create ourselves out of nothing. Society helps in creating the foundations of who we are. Like what I've mentioned in our previous lessons, our family plays a vital role in developing ourselves. And that's what also number 1 is trying to tell us. When we are young, we do not automatically know who we are. But with the society or the people around us, it helps us to say who we really are. Now, let's proceed to number 2. Whether we like to admit it or not, we actually need others to affirm or reinforce who we think we are. We have our friends and family to tell us the idea of who they think we are. Example, your friends can tell you that you are a good friend. You are that and this. Our society, which is basically our friends and family, can tell us who they think we are. So, that's another reason why society is the product of the self and identity. And the third one, what we think is important to us may also have been influenced by what is important in our social or historical context. Social interaction and group affiliation are vital factors in creating our self-concept, especially in the aspect of providing us with our social identity. For example, you are or you belong to a Christian social group where you are very active and read verses. From there, it gives us the idea and other people who or what kind of person you are. Then now, let's tackle Carver and Sayer, which identified 2 types of self that we can be aware of. 1. The private self. The private self are our internal standards and private thoughts and feelings. So, the private self
It tells us our internal beings that others can see. They might suspect that you feel something, but this is something you can tell. For example, your thoughts towards your friends or family. Next is the public self. Public self or your public image commonly geared toward having a good presentation of yourself to others. So the public self, in psychology, this is what we call the persona. It is the public image that we show to our friend or family members about ourselves. There are times when we are aware of our self-concept. This is called self-awareness. Self-awareness also presents us with at least three other self-schema: the actual self, ideal self, and out self. Let's go to the first one. Actual self is who you are at the moment. In psychology, we have this term being mindful. It is you are being aware of what is happening today. You are aware of your own feelings, whether you are happy, sad, or beat down for today. That is the actual self being mindful at the moment. Now let's go to the ideal self. This is who you like to be. Next is the out self. It is who you think you should be. Now let's go to our last topic. There are two types of social comparison theory, which is the downward comparison theory and upward comparison theory. Upward social comparison, individuals compare themselves to others who are socially better to view self more positively. Downward social comparison, a defensive tendency to evaluate oneself in comparison with others whose troubles are more serious than one's own. People with high self-esteem are commonly described as outgoing, adventurous, and adaptable in a lot of situations, but they may also be bullies and experiment an abusive behavior with drugs, alcohol, and sex. So that would be all about the self as cognitive construct. So here's 𝚿𝚛𝚘𝚓𝚎 to discuss to you about the self in Western and Eastern thoughts.
Western does not discount the role of environment and society in the formations. Always looking forward themselves. You compare yourself in order to be better. For example, talk more about the personal attribute or describing themselves. Westerners may seem to have a loose associations or even loyalty to the group because everyone is under a competitions and can say that we always promote ideas for our competitions and protect the individual. Asians, where their collectivity cultures put more emphasis on hierarchy as a culture, wants to keep things in the harmony and others.
Everyone, my name is 𝚿𝚛𝚘𝚓𝚎. The 𝚿𝚛𝚘𝚓 living is the way of the Tao or the universe. The self is not a just extensions of the family or the community is a part of the universe, one of the Buddhism. Buddhism is Buddhism the self, which is evolution's born news of the ignorance of trying to all the control thing and human centuries and need to touch himself also. The the Buddhism is focused on education as means of the technical Aristotle and was adopted as an official philosophical system is called under the hand, inferior with the 10th, this is 2nd century, and Chinese. A system of not accreditatory means endurance high and hierarchy of official appointed Dutch hearing and commercial explanation.
that the 6 chromosomes of human defines the sex under secondary sexual characteristic from childhood. We are controlled by our own genetic makeup. It influences the way we treat ourselves and others. Development of reproduction system. The formation of male and female structure depends on the presence of testosterone. Puberty is the period of life, generally between the age of 10 to 15 years old. Diseases associated with the reproductive. Usual infection caused by poly and STD. In males, the common inflammatory conditions are prostatitis, urethritis, and epididymitis. Tumor of breast and cervix are the common reproductive cancer for the female, and prostate cancer for the male. What is erogenous zone? It refers to the part of the body that primarily receptive and increase sexual arousal when touched in sexual manner. Human sexual behavior. It is defined as any activity, solidarity, to person or in a group that induces sexual arousal. Two kinds of human sexual behavior. First, solitary behavior. Self-gratification, usually it takes place in private as an end itself. Second, sociosexual behavior, a behavior that occurs between only one male and only one female. Sexually transmitted diseases or STD are infection transmitted from an infected person to an uninfected person through sexual contacts. STDs can be caused by bacteria, viruses, or parasites. Here are some examples of STDs diseases. First, gonorrhea, syphilis, HPV, HBs, Trichomonas vaginalis. Natural and artificial of contraception. The natural family planning methods do not involve any chemical or foreign body introduction into the human body. Examples for these are the abstinence calendar method, BBT, ovulation method, cervical mucus method. Artificial methods include oral contraceptives, transdermal patch, vaginal ring, chemical barriers, IUD, hormonal injection, cervical cup, male's condom, and female's condom.